Welcome into the Backroads Bill Podcast. I'm Ben, and this week we are taking a road trip down Highway 17 to visit our neighbors, Sudbury, as we are going to be talking about the Sudbury Regreening Project, this project that's been going on since 1978, which is, if my math is correct, 47 years ago as of 2025. And our guests today have both been involved. In fact, Peter, one of our guests, has been there right from the beginning, and they're going to talk about really what this project has done, has brought Sudbury back from the devastation that occurred during the smelting phases of the 19th century and just devastated the environment, devastated vegetation, and what Sudbury has done as a community, as a government, to bring it back to a beautiful landscape that it is today. And it's still being worked on. Of course, their work isn't done yet, but the work that they have done in those 40 odd years has really been impressive. And we're going to go all into that. It's a really exciting episode. But first, we do have to thank today's title sponsor, Source for Sports. It's almost that time of year. Early mornings at the rink, fresh notebooks and backpacks, and a community gearing up for another great season of varsity sports. At Source for Sports North Bay, we're proud to be part of it all. Whether it's finding your kid's first pair of skates, gearing up for tryouts, or outfitting your team for the season ahead, we've got you covered. Because here, we're not just a sports store, we're neighbors, coaches, teammates, and fans. And we're proud to cheer you on every shift, step, and stride of the way. Visit Source for Sports North Bay at 1321 Fisher Street and let us help you along your way. So today we have a pair of really neat guests on today, Bill, as we have, first of all, Peter Beckett, who is a professor emeritus at Laurentian, focused on restoration and wetland ecology, and also Sarah Woods, who is the co-vice chair of the Regreening Committee. Welcome both of you into the Backroads Bill Podcast.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Well, Ben, I've wanted to tackle this story for a long time because this is a world-class case study, the Regreening of Sudbury. And just for the listeners and viewers on all the platforms, I did some math. You know, the first smelters and roasting in beds occurred around 1888, and that went forward. And then we got into the various stacks, and the super stack came on board about 1970 and to 72, and now, of course, they're tearing it down. But in between that, the acid rain and the precipitation was first noted in the 1950s, and then in the fish populations in the 60s. So when you do some of the math, you know, for approximately 100 years, nothing was really done about this. The effects of acid rain rained down on the Sudbury landscape. And then, early in the day in 1970s, 1972, and Peter will talk, I think that's how we'll get started. The Vegetation Enhancement Technical Advisory Committee, and then by 1978, the Sudbury Land Reclamation Program came on. But Peter, take us back to those early days in 1970s. How was this recognized that there was a real problem here on the landscape with acid rain and all the vegetation, in essence, was gone?
Well, it already does start with the super stack, which, of course, did open in 1972. With the pollution controls that the super stack offered, it allowed the community to start thinking about what could be done with the devastated landscape, of which there's 17,000 hectares was totally destroyed, and Tom Davis, who was chair of the new regional government at that time, decided that there should be an advisory committee known as VTAC to give advice on how the Sudbury landscape could be improved. The first thing that happened was a survey of the area to see how bad things actually were, and this was done between 1973 and about 1975. It was then realized that perhaps one could try some experiments to see whether anything could actually grow in the Sudbury Barrens, which were very acidic, has lost all their nutrients and organic material, and there were elevated levels of a number of metals. So two professors at Laurentian, Keith Winterholder and Gerard Corton, started the first experiments. And they proceeded in the normal scientific manner. They tried to add amendments to pots of the barren soil in the greenhouse with various grass species. They were successful there, and the next phase was to try the experiment in the field. And by about 1976, 77, there were field experiments testing the various amendments that could be applied to get grass to grow. And the outcome of this led to the Sudbury recipe, which has really been used for the past 50 years, but modified as scientific improvements have gone along. And so that recipe consists of adding limestone to counter the acidity, about 10 metric tons per hectare, adding some fertilizer because all the nutrients were missing, particularly phosphorus was the most limiting nutrient, 200 to 400 kilograms per hectare, and then adding a nurse crop of grass seeds and legumes as about 10 kilograms per hectare. Right? And so there was a demonstration large-scale plot carried out by school children in 1977, which so impressed the city that they decided, through the advice of Bill Larkenbach, that a large-scale reclamation program, as it was called then, should actually begin. And so VTAC initiated the land reclamation program in 1978.
Well, so that's kind of that's a milestone for sure, from 78 to now 53 years. Now, Sarah, you've been with VTAC for 15 years, and I don't know how long you were in Sudbury before then. But of course, over the 53 years, we've seen this. What, of course, Sudbury was known as the moonscape, and the Apollo missions came up for training and things. But things have drastically changed, almost to the point now when you go into Sudbury, if you did the generations of today would not really know. There's more to be done, and we're going to talk about that. But from your perspective, being younger than Peter and myself, and when did you notice it in your lifetime, and then, of course, as a professional?
Good question. You're right. Sudbury today doesn't look anything like it did in 78 when land rec started, or at least most of it doesn't, and the urban corridors don't look like they used to. So it's hard. I feel like I grew up with the trees. So when the tree planting program started, I certainly wouldn't have. I would have been too young to have that memory. But I think I became aware of how of this sort of history back in university. Right, taking courses with Peter and others who were involved in the early days of regreening, and as I became interested in the topic, I of course had discussions with other people, and it was so surprising to me to learn from my parents, especially my mother, who grew up in just east of Sudbury, and her dad was in the mining industry. And she clearly remembers when the trees were planted on the Wanapitei Hill. And so her memories, so one generation older than me, are much more vivid. So she would have remembered the black landscape, the tree planting, and those trees kind of growing up. And of course, the trees were growing up as I was. So I guess from both a personal and professional level, it would have been some though. But certainly coincided with.
Sarah, I really liked your comment about growing up with the trees, and I mean, again, I can remember that so many times going to Sudbury and going on the Canadian Ecology Centre mining tours with Peter and others. And Peter, as this got going, from 1978, when did you first notice? I mean, this had really not been done before. I mean, people have planted trees and farms and reforestation practices, but this was a little different because of there was damage, and so there needed to be mitigation. In what years, kind of approximately, did you notice that? Wow, we can do this.
Actually, that all started in 1978. I remember a subgroup of the committee would go out to the Coniston Bonaparte area every day after the grass seed had been spread around August the 15th, and we went out to see whether there was a hint of green on the hillside. And after about 10 days and following a good Sudbury autumn rain, there was a kind of tinge of green on the Coniston Hills. And I still remember we all looked at each other and shouted, "Eureka!" Going to work. We were really worried that if the first year large-scale program did not operate, that it would get the program itself would get cancelled because it looked like we couldn't actually do it.
Yeah,
and then we were especially impressed that the following year we could go and start planting the trees, which actually came from M&R nurseries, and they were the pines in the same area. However, they are small little trees. So it's probably about 10 years before one really started to see a major difference, particularly in the Coniston Bonaparte corridor, which was one of the most devastated corridors coming into Sudbury. And since that time, the trees have just continued to grow, and other species have also invaded the area, and it's becoming more and more like a large urban forest, which all Sudburyans benefit from.
Now, Sarah, tell us some of the things in your tenure with VTech. What are some of the things that have been done since then, or since you were a student and noticed that you can say, your aha moments as well, not only as an individual, but as a member of the committee and the community?
I think what strikes me most is how much the efforts have evolved and morphed over time from the beginnings, where really the goal was to establish tree cover, and specifically tree cover along the corridors, the entryways into Sudbury, to change the perception of the community from moonscape to anything but moonscape, frankly. And back in the 2000s, we started. So just as I started, there's more and more discussion about biodiversity. So sure, we need the tree cover. Trees are an important part of forests, but they're not the only part, and they aren't the only parts that we can intervene to help improve. So we started planting more and more species, different species of trees, broadleaf instead of just the pine, for example, and slowly introduced different shrubs. Now we actually go out, and by we, the regreening program actually goes out to collect seeds to have propagated in greenhouses, because of course we're interested in introducing species that aren't necessarily commercially available. And so we have to collect our own seeds to be able to, from the outskirts, from the less damaged areas, to then be able to introduce them into the more damaged areas, for the purpose of increasing biodiversity. And now, there's increasingly more discussion about climate change and carbon sequestration, and trees, of course, play an important role in that. So there's, again, trees are at the core of what the regreening program does, but there are so many other so many other benefits, and we've sort of expanded the goals of the program to help contribute to biodiversity, climate change, wetland restoration. It's really expanded over time.
I really like that lesson learned about the seeds in the new hybrid seeds, I guess we're going to call them, that are perhaps more hardier and will sustain. Because, Peter, as you know, I think it was the Brundtland Commission of 1998, the words biodiversity and sustainability were kind of born around about that time. And of course, I think it applies to this, this world class in the beginning, as you said, Gerard Corton and other colleagues started these experiments. So, what do you think that we have learned from this grandiose experience?
We've learned many things, and much of this has been in tandem, I think, with the whole growing knowledge about restoration science. Right? Everybody in the early days just wanted to get a green cover, which and of some benefit to the community or some benefit to a project, which might be called reclamation. But these days, we're going for a much more wholesome restoration of the whole system on the landscape, and as has been said, we have a number of objectives. We're doing this for the aesthetics, for the Sudbury community, for biodiversity, and for what we call our climate change aspect, in that we're especially designing areas with increased density of trees for carbon sequestration. So what has happened in Sudbury is not isolated from what is going on in the rest of the world, and it's very fitting that in this decade, this UN decade of restoration, that Sudbury is used as a model. Right? Many people come to Sudbury to see what we've done, to see what we have learned, to see how we've changed the process, so that they can go home, and especially in that we have community involvement. That is a key feature of the Sudbury program. So they learn the lessons from Sudbury and then go back to their own communities and try and initiate restoration projects there.
Yeah, well, it attracted the attention of a lot of people, especially the late Jane Goodall, a primate scientist that we kind of all know, and she became an ambassador for the regreening effort in Sudbury. Was there many, many times. We have that pavilion sign dedicated to her on the east end of Sudbury there. And Sarah, before I turn it over to Ben, because I've been hogging the questions, but tell us about the plans, the current plans, the contemporary plans, the future plans of the VTech committee and the restoration project in general. Where are we headed?
That's a good question. After it's a little bit of more of the same. It's really hard to estimate how much area is left to regreen, but we say it's probably about half of the originally damaged area, the semi-barren ring that was impacted. So roughly about half of it's been addressed through some sort of intervention, but there's still a lot of area left to go. So every year the program still spreads lime. Every year we still, there's still grasses and herbs that are planted, the Sudbury seed mix, more trees, more pine trees, and other species as well. I think last year the program planted about 140 or 150,000 trees and shrubs. So the program's still very, very active, and there's still a lot to do. So I do see a lot more of just that, the basic Sudbury recipe being applied over the next several years. And the other, we're always open to new research, and refocusing the objectives based on new information that's coming through. As It doesn't, small tweaks can have big impacts to something like carbon sequestration, for example. So there's some flexibility there as well that the program is able to receive new information, new research, and apply it. And the other thing we're starting to think about more and more is, we've done a lot of work. There's a lot of intervention that's occurred, 12 or 11 million trees and shrubs-ish by the regreening program alone, has a big impact on the landscape, and in some areas more than others. So we're increasingly looking at, how much, trying to quantify how much have we done in different areas, and are there some areas that we can say, we've done a lot. The ecosystem is, sure, it's not a mature ecosystem. It's new because it's been introduced in the last 40 or 50 years. But is it on a trajectory that will continue to improve? And can we leave some of these areas to continue to recover naturally without more intervention? So that helps us focus which areas are in greatest need and which areas are really on their way that we can kind of put aside for now. Maybe we'll revisit them as new research comes in the future. But for now, maybe there's some areas that we can put aside. So we are giving some thought to that. It's a challenging topic, but it is certainly, I think, one that's valuable, if only to help us focus future restoration efforts where they're most needed.
This is a perfect segue into Ben's green thumb question.
I don't know.
Can I add something to say?
Yeah,
Can I
sure.
add something to say? Can I add something to Sarah's
Absolutely.
comment? Sarah, I know you already did this out, but Sarah wasn't at the meeting earlier this week.
See, things change all the time.
No, that's good. No, you were busy. Where one of the subcommittees, we were actually looking at what we're going to do in the next 5 years. And we have decided that we're going to concentrate on the barren area around the old Coniston smelter. And we're going to try and complete the process of regreening as much as we can do around that smelter. And in fact, there's been already quite a lot of work done in that area. We hardly have enough barren land left that we can actually access, right, to complete the process in that area. So we're going to do that. There's also been a large amount of work in that area, and we're going to add biodiversity and finish the rest of those sites. And some sites we just can't access, so they're just going to be left. So that's basically the plan for the next 5 years, essentially to finish one of the three barren rings in Sudbury.
Dear North Bay, you've always been more than a place on the map. You're home to me. This is where I built a life with my husband, raised our kids, and taught in local schools for over 24 years. I'm proud to be part of this community. Earlier this year, my world shifted. After living with anxiety, depression, and PTSD for much of my life, I reached a point where I couldn't keep going alone. Walking into the emergency department at the North Bay Regional Health Center was one of the hardest things I've ever done. But what I found there changed everything. A nurse who made me feel safe, a crisis worker who truly listened. For the first time in a long time, I felt seen. That care gave me hope, and it inspired me to give back by supporting local healthcare so that others in our community can access the same compassionate care I did. If my story resonates with you, I hope you'll consider supporting the NBRHC Foundation. Please visit nbrhcfoundation.ca or call 705-495-8125 to give. Because mental health is health. With gratitude, Tiffany Van Meer.
I've been formulating this for a little bit, so
I bet you have.
So hopefully this makes sense. So one of the things about our world, and is that we have a lot more information than we did. Peter, when you were talking about earlier on when we were talking about the acid rain and all that stuff that happened decades ago, we have a lot more information available. Science has gone leaps and bounds, but with the internet and with people being able to look up stuff, which is great. A lot of people have opinions. I think we're in an interesting spot with our political climate as well, and people being very divisive about it. And I was curious and I'll open this up probably a little bit more to Sarah, but I'm curious if you guys have ever really found a lot of maybe red tape or political backlash or anything, because with climate change, you have a lot of people advocating for it, and then you have there's kind of two sides to it. And I was curious if you ever kind of ran into any problems from today's day and age in terms of the political climate.
No, perhaps not as much as you might expect. I think one of the beautiful things about the Regreening Committee and the regreening efforts, there are a couple of things I'd say on that. One is that there's such a sense of collaboration that everybody sits at the table, whether it be the municipality, municipal government, nonprofit organizations, mining companies, government representatives from different levels of government as well. And the focus of the committee is really on regreening. And we can kind of leave politics out of it in terms of everyone there wants to improve the environment, wants to improve the tree cover, the biodiversity, carbon sequestration. So as a group, it works so well. The sense of collaboration is very unique to Sudbury, very unique to regreening. And when we share the story, and Peter does this more than I do, but when we share this story internationally, and the question is, what is the secret to your success? It really comes down to that collaboration, and it's really hard to replicate elsewhere. Others have tried with varying degrees of success, and it's something that's incredibly special to this program. So I think that's part of the reason that we're kind of isolated or insulated from the political level. The other is that I think you're right. The topic of climate change might be divisive, but the program's focus isn't necessarily on climate change. It's sure climate change or climate change mitigation, carbon sequestration is one component of one positive benefit of tree planting. Increased biodiversity, increased aesthetics, increased water quality. There are so many benefits to tree planting that tree planting itself isn't necessarily a political issue. Maybe at the fringes, some of the benefits, could be up for discussion. But I think tree planting itself is, I don't want to give a political answer, but tree planting itself, is not itself divisive.
I guess the other side of that too is, did you ever feel less about the climate change, but did you ever feel like there was any? It was hard to get off the ground, maybe when you first start to talk about the project and you're trying to get all these people involved. That maybe there's people chomping at the bit to want to see the value in what you guys are doing, locally, I would say.
Yeah, and I think that's a Peter. At the beginning, I think there was support. There was support from government organizations. There was support from the mining companies from the beginning. But Peter, I don't know if you can speak to the early beginnings and the challenges that there might have been in just starting a larger scale program.
Especially, Peter, the mining companies, I think, and their efforts in the early days going forward.
The real concern in the early days is whether, and the kind of fear is the program wouldn't actually, the application, the treatment wouldn't actually work. it was also at that time, it was also remember at that time that already the two companies were also doing some reclamation work on their tailings. And this is people like Bob Mitaluki from Falconbridge, now Glencore, and especially Tom Peters from Inco, now Valley. So we had their benefits as well when we were trying to start the Sudbury program, and of course it being a community effort. I kind of say in jest, but not totally in jest. I think everybody in Sudbury has planted a tree uh, at some time in their life. And I think maybe it's a Sudbury phenomenon that people can see how the environment has been changed, and they don't question the fact that today we should be why are we doing this? They've seen the benefits, they live with the benefits, and it's they are hoping that the program is going to continue because it's we're only really halfway when you actually look at an aerial map. Sorry about that. When you look at an aerial map of Sudbury, I was also going to say that right now the regreening program is playing another important role in that the present mayor wants Sudbury to be one of the first cities across Canada to declare 30 by 50, that he's met the 30 by 30 challenge. That's 30% of the area in some kind of protected green space by the year 2030. And he has a task force. And much of the work that we have done in the regreening, setting up new urban forests and things, actually can count towards this 30 by 30 target. And indeed, very recently, 2,000 hectares have recently been sanctioned by Environment Canada to be part of the 30 by 30, and that does include some of the more mature regreening areas. So
maybe this is part of my next question for you both is that how can we not take this history, this world-class case study that's been successful, albeit only halfway through. How can we not take all this for granted? And maybe we'll start off with you, Peter, and then go to Sarah.
Well, we at the committee level, we do think about what the next generation thinks about Sudbury, the younger generation, because when they look out the windows, they don't see the barren hills anymore. They see the developing urban forest. And they may or may not know much about the history. So we actually have a regreening educator, and she's going into the schools and telling them about the history of Sudbury and how it has changed. And they also do some kind of regreening activity. This is the second one we've had, and it's a high. It is the schools are demanding the degree educator goes in and talks about Sudbury and gets the next generation involved. So we are, and they are going to be the people who are going to continue finishing the other half of the regreening of Sudbury.
Sarah.
Yeah, no, Peter's bang on. I think we certainly are sensitive to the fact that Sudbury doesn't look the same. Newcomers or younger people don't have the same connection, and so we do see the need to form that connection. Peter sort of jokes that everyone in Sudbury's planted a tree. He's probably not far off on that, and we still offer those opportunities to people because it is ongoing, and it helps develop a sense of ownership and a connection to place. I think when people, especially younger people, have an opportunity to participate in such a large scale important program. So that reminder, that connection, I think, is important. We do other outreach. We attend community events. We give trees away at the annual gardening day at the Sudbury market, and we run out of trees every year because there's people are very, very interested, and I think there's different levels of engagement, and we don't want the community to take regreening for granted. On the other hand, knowing that we've been so successful, that Sudbury doesn't look the same, and it looks like a natural forest. I think we need to take pride in that as well. And I think taking for granted. The committee is still very vibrant. The committee is able to recruit younger people. There's a lot of interest to continue the efforts. There's still funding opportunities, which anyone who does fundraising knows there's always challenges, but there are still funders interested in continuing the program. So I think at the technical level, at the fundraising level, there's still interest in continuing, and that's a reflection that we don't necessarily take it for granted, that we still recognize that there's a lot of work to continue.
Yeah, it's not like some community service clubs in some communities where there's an aging population, and there's no one to backfill. That's not the case here. Ben.
Yeah, as we start to wrap up here, the one question that I really wanted to ask is a lot, obviously myself included, but a lot of our listeners don't know a lot about the project. They might not know a lot about the specifics, which is why we're talking to you both here today. What is the one, it could be a really cool thing, it could be something that you wish people knew, but for each of you, what's one thing that if you went up to somebody who has no idea about this, that you'd want them to know about the regreening project?
Oh, there's lots.
Just one.
Just one.
I might slip in a second, but
the other side of that is even somebody who knows about it, but maybe it's something behind the scenes that even the people of Sudbury don't know.
Well, I'll give an example that everybody sees but might not know. When I do school programs or speak to people about the program, it doesn't matter where you are especially in the urban core, in those more damaged areas, but I'll ask them to stand and look around at the green, right? All of the trees on the landscape, especially the pine trees, and remind them that every one of those pine trees has been planted by somebody, right? To imagine 11 million or so, or 10 point something million through the regreening program, several million by the mining companies. We see that the Sudbury does not look the same. And again, it's to the taking things for granted or not being aware. So if you look around, you're driving through Sudbury and think, wow, it's green here. That's because of the regreening efforts. It's the scale is just phenomenal.
Yeah. Peter.
I was going to say how long the program has actually been going on. It started the actual regreening started in 1978, and it's now the year 2025, and the program is still very active, still doing a lot in the community, and it is very unusual for some kind of environmental programs to be fully engaged, just like it was at the beginning after 53 years. And from what I can see, it's going to remain that way. I feel that I'm at the end. I'm retired. I'm at the end of my contribution, and I really look forward to how the next generation is going to continue the regreening. And perhaps it will be interesting to see, what state the program is in after, say, 75 years or even 100 years. I'm hoping by that time, of course, it's not needed.
Well, that's the longitudinal nature of this success story. You know, it doesn't go unnoticed that you both have, green tops on. I don't know if they're regreening merchandise, but I think you should consider having a green shirt day regionally or something like that as far as your next marketing, because, again, this is a world-class case study, and it was worthwhile. Oh, there you go.
I've got my green shirt on.
That's amazing.
Well, I kind of realized that, and Sarah's is kind of cut off there, but I can see it now that how apropos that we end this. That has been efforts by the community, and actually so many people in the community effort. And thank you for both being on the Backroads Bill podcast.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you. It's been a fun time.
A big thank you to Peter and Sarah for jumping on with us. And, that conversation, that whole episode was a great example of the Sudbury community and government coming together. I said that at the beginning, but really reimagining the city following, obviously Sudbury has a huge mining and smelting industry, and that caused so much damage to the vegetation in the 19th century. And for Sudbury to look the way it does today is absolutely fantastic. So good luck to them going forward, and hopefully it just keeps going in the right direction, which it looks like it will. If you enjoyed this week's episode, you can find more episodes of the Backroads Bill podcast on your favorite podcast player. We're on Spotify, Apple. If you want to watch this in video, you can check out the North Bay Echo YouTube channel. And of course, everything that we have, video, audio, etc., is all available on northbayecho.ca, where you can find not just this podcast, but a whole slew of other local North Bay and area podcasts, ranging from all sorts of different genres and topics that you can look for. So head over to northbayecho.ca to find more, and check out our socials on Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, and Facebook at North Bay Echo. So that wraps things up for us. Join us again next week for another Backroads adventure.